Welcome to the Health and Wealth Podcast. This is a show dedicated to the pursuit of health and wealth without losing your health to attain that wealth. With this podcast, we're going to share stories and best practices of successful business owners who either sell health or have health as part of their business plan. You're going to get great marketing and strategic advice from proven, successful experts. We will also be sharing stories from successful entrepreneurs who lost their health on the road to wealth, what they learned, and how they do things differently now, both in business and in life. Let's welcome your host, businesswoman, personal trainer, and podcast queen, JJ Flazanes.
Welcome, everyone, to today's show. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about anger and spirituality. It's a solo show. It's going to be a conversation with you and me. I had this idea several weeks ago. I'm sure I was frustrated by the conditions of our world. And I thought about how I and others that I know and other healers that I know shame themselves for having what is a normal reaction to environments. Now, I know on past shows we've talked about unconditional love, and unconditional love is the goal. But remember, in law of attraction terms and in life, contrast is necessary for clarity. Contrast is also necessary for expansion. So we can't grow unless we have contrast. And Doug and I were walking on the beach this morning, and one of the things we were talking about is between family members and people that we know and the level of consciousness or lack thereof. I mean, Doug's contrast of his last wife leaving him was the spark of awakening. And for that, he is grateful. He appreciates his awakening, and he can look back now with still, maybe a little bit of sadness or regret in certain areas, but with appreciation. Took a little while. I had a conversation with my mother last week about, epigenetics. In a way, I didn't mention epigenetics. I just said, Mom, it doesn't really matter what everyone else is doing. It only matters what you're doing and what you believe about it, and therefore what you're in alignment with and what evidence you're searching for. Knowing full well she wasn't asking, knowing full well she wasn't receiving or listening, I think what ended up happening is that I was frustrated and I was feeling helpless because they don't listen and they don't get it. And I'm okay with that. Most of the time, I have worked on my inner rescuer. I have dealt with the releasing and surrendering and letting go in respect of their process. Because remember, everybody, you have your own path and so do they. And if you follow me on Instagram, I put a pretty nice meme up a couple weeks ago that said, if they're not asking, they're not listening. So save your energy, transcend yourself, respect their journey, and allow yours. We all have a different path to walk, and we're all not on the same time frame. That's a hard one to remember when you're in the midst of wanting to do something and not feeling free and looking around at people that you think are creating a lack of freedom for you. Trust me, as a triple Sag and Pisces, that is one that I work on often, and it's about your point of focus. So as I was rollerblading and probably frustrated and a little angry and wanting to scream at everyone, I recognized that anger is something a lot of people have and repress. I know a lot of healers, I know a lot of spiritual people, and a handful of them represent sort of what I think the world expects a personality to be who's spiritual. And I want to debunk that right now. I want to tell you the scientific reason why and the emotional psychological disadvantages of holding that kind of image in your mind. As we all know, Chinese medicine studies the body in terms of energy systems called meridians. Meridians run all up and down your body, and they're connected to organs. Now, Chinese medicine is 2,000 years old, whereas Western medicine is 200 years old. So in terms of who's been around longer, Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine doesn't look at your symptoms. They look at root cause. They look at systems, how energy flows, where energy pulls. Each one of your organs represents a place in which energy like a different kind of energy. So for instance, grief is in the lungs. We have liver is anger. We've got kidneys are fear. Your spleen is worry. Your heart is love. So we have these different energy systems within the body that Chinese medicine recognizes has a cycle. And just like the goal of emotional processing, we want air to come in and air to come out. So emotions come in and they come out. We take it in and we express it. We don't hold it. Where dysfunction happens is when you're holding on to an emotion and it's residing in an area of your body that's pulling energy, that's holding energy, and now creating dis-ease because the cycle of energy flow, otherwise known as qi in your body, has been disrupted. It isn't flowing because it's pulling in an area. And when we think of spirituality, I think most people get a picture of some monk, Zen-like person just meditating, not bothered by anything. And a lot of you, especially those of you in my inner circle, you think that's me. And sometimes that is me. But it isn't me all the time, and I had to work to get here. And what I mean by work is I had to learn how to take in air and let it go, to allow my emotions in and to express them, but to do it in a way that actually was effective and efficient. So first you have to understand your emotions, and you have to be able to understand how you got there. Emotions don't just happen. You don't just catch an emotion. All of a sudden you feel an emotion, you think, whoa, who gave that to me? That would be considered victim. You have an interpretation. I did a whole little mini course. And in fact, I have a mini course. If anybody wants to take it, it's jjflizanes.com/mini course. And it's on the anatomy of emotion. It's about an hour and 20-minute long video. There are worksheets to work through along with the video. There are 3 extra downloadable audios to support that. And it's literally giving you the tools to process your emotions. Because if you do not process and express or release them, you end up back where you started. And here's how energy builds up. So back to anger and emotions. I've done so many shows on back pain and the link to back pain and rage and emotions. And when I was reading Dr. Nasha's book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, and she'll be back on the show again, there's an actual section in her book about the personalities of people who attract cancer. And I don't have the book in front of me and I don't remember all the points. We'll talk about it on that show. But I thought that was a great piece to bring forward because, again, I think many people judge themselves about the personality that they put out to the world. So if you're supposed to be spiritual or you consider yourself spiritual, then, oh my gosh, you need to be like Gary Zukav. You need to be monk-like. Almost emotionless. And I know I even held myself to that standard in that interview, and I didn't like it, which is why I made a point. I didn't like it from me, not from him. And that's why I made a point in the interview to ask him about personality, because I heard him talk about personalities. And here's a very clear difference of personality. He's a Libra. He's actually was, if not a monk, but he was in the church. He might have been a Buddhist monk, but that explained his personality in that way, in that delivery system. And here I am with several fire signs in me. I have 4, 3 Sages and an Aries, along with Aquarius and Pisces. So I am mostly fire. And when you're fire, your fire dominates that energy. So if I'm next to somebody who's mostly water and spiritual, their watery selves are very flowy and emotional, and they want to be in this space all the time. And that's not a judgment. That is what it is. But on the flip side, those people tend to not express their anger. They may represent what you think of, what you picture in your mind when you think of spiritual. But I will tell you, how many people I run into who have physical ailments or overeat or use food as a crutch because they are unwilling, because they're afraid of, they judge themselves for having anger, or they're so used to judging it that they turn it off and they think, oh, I never get angry. Yet all of the people that I've met who have serious debilitating back problems are people who have repressed anger and don't let it out. So part of today's show is I just wanted to go over some of the emotional scale. Abraham talks about the vibrational scale, the frequency scale, the emotions. And I know a lot of you have heard me talk about the feelings and needs list. I do it in the inner circle when we have our group coaching calls. And people who don't have it, who have just joined, say, how can I get it? Where can I download it? And it's probably taken me 20 or 50 people to ask me that for me to finally do it. So if you want a copy of the feelings and needs list, as well as the emotional scale, you can go to jjflazanes.com/feelings list. And both of the links I've mentioned so far today will be in the show notes. Again, feelings list, jjflazanes.com/feelings list. And I added, for those of you that already have the needs and feelings list, I added the emotional scale because I want you to print that out also. I want to get out of the judgment that we have about anger not being spiritual or anger being dangerous. Anger, literally, in Chinese medicine, is part of the process by which you take in information, have an emotion, and cycle through the emotional chi, if you will, to allow it to be processed and released. When you do not express it, I'm thinking about last week's show with Wendy, and she said a different word. Compressed, I think, was the word that she used. And I thought about that for a minute. And it's true, it is compressed. Compressed is also repressed. So she was talking about women healing themselves and doing the deeper work after divorce, but it's everybody all of the time. I got frustrated at my mom because she doesn't listen to anything I say, or listen to any of the shows, or read any of the books, or has any curiosity whatsoever about learning anything new. And that frustrated me. But again, I've worked on that, healing my own need to be right, need to be seen or heard, because I don't need it from her. But I think what I did in that moment was just my unexpressed frustration that I have about the current situation. And I want you to think about that, because if you repress your anger, it becomes disease. If you judge it and then repress it. And for those of you, and anger can definitely be something that, depending on if you're male or female, can be scary for other people. So maybe you hold it back because you don't want to scare anyone. But I want you to recognize that you're doing it at the detriment of yourself. You're doing it at the detriment of not expressing who you are, not allowing yourself to feel your feelings, and making a choice that their feelings are more important than yours. And that's simply not true. So for those of you that have any judgment about anger and you think, I'm never angry. Anger scares me. And trust me, anger scared me too. I grew up in a house where there was frustration, but never real anger. So when I lived with anger, it scared me. But it was an opportunity for me to work it out. It was an opportunity for me to really hear what was underneath the anger and to see it really clearly. Anger is part of the process on the way up the emotional scale. So at the bottom of the scale, the lowest frequency, the worst feeling place is fear, grief, depression, despair, and powerlessness. Powerlessness. When people are depressed, they feel powerless. If you are someone who has dealt with depression, I'm inviting you to tap into your anger. Now, anger is about 5 up the scale. That was 22, and anger lives at 17. Yep, so 5 up the scale. So 1 up from fear, grief, depression, despair, and powerless is insecurity, guilt, and unworthiness. 1 up from that's jealousy. 1 up from that is hatred and rage. Around the hatred place, we're now starting to take our power back. If you're someone who has pain, cancer, depression, some weird thing in your body that you haven't been able to heal, you've done all the right health things, you have alternative medicine things, and you haven't dealt with your emotions, I'm going to invite you to tap into some good, healthy anger and rage. Now, there's a way to do this. I have a couple clients I'm working with right now that we're dealing with this. And What I always recommend for women especially is, and definitely for men, but for women is to find a safe space. Like do a detox, emotional detox day. Go take yourself somewhere like a hotel room and plan it out. And I've done that with clients where you plan out the day of literally detoxing yourself of this emotion, reaching in, grabbing it, expressing it, letting it out safely so it can be done. It can be gone. It's literally taking up real estate in your body when it's not expressed. But I want you to recognize that it's not because you're a mean person, you're an angry person. Everyone has a degree of anger. The difference is, do you express it or not? And then the next question is, do you use it to deflect what's underneath it? Anger is the lid on the pot, and what's underneath is depression. What's underneath it is unworthiness. What's underneath it is fear. And oftentimes, men especially, will use anger because it feels better. They don't want to feel powerless. They don't want to feel out of control. They don't want to feel fear. They have control issues. They have addictions. They have addictions to control because they don't trust what would happen if they lost control. So they stay in anger to keep safe and to feel better about themselves because they've judged themselves. And again, this is men and women. They've judged themselves that if I feel fear and powerless, I therefore am unworthy. I'm unworthy. The things they've said are true. I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. All of those negative fears and beliefs that you have about yourself, those limiting beliefs live there. So if you're someone that deals, again, with fear, grief, depression, powerlessness, despair, insecurity, guilt, unworthiness, and jealousy, I want you to find your inner anger. Now, I'm not telling you all to go get angry and then react to that and go do something stupid and project. Been dealing with a lot of projection recently also too in my groups because people think that if I feel something, I should say it. And heck, if it's positive, I definitely should say it. But we forget that if you're talking to someone, you have an agenda when you're saying that. And it could be just to express your feelings, but depending on how the other person receives it, it actually may not go the way you think it's going to go. And that's a love language conversation and the shadow side of love language, which we did a show on here recently, Doug and I. And I would invite you all to, I think it's here. If it's not here, it's in the inner circle. But the shadow side of love language is a really powerful show to address your hotspots and the belief patterns that you have that make you triggered, that get you triggered when the reverse of it doesn't happen. Like, so let's say for Doug, for instance, or someone who has words of affirmation. If your dominant love language is words of affirmation and you say something kind of neutral or slight criticism to somebody else, they will be butthurt and they will take it really hard. And my mom is definitely one of hers is words of affirmation. And she has often said, be careful what you say because you can't take it back and it hurts somebody else. And I always thought it's just words. People say stuff they don't mean all the time when they're angry or when they're upset. And it's just words, but my love language isn't words. So I can have that kind of observer relationship with words that she doesn't have. Now, can you heal that? Of course you can. Of course you can. But it takes work and it also takes you identifying those places. Like for some people, it's gifts. Like they don't get you a gift for something and you're like, oh my God, that person's terrible. I'm writing them off. I'm never talking to them again because they didn't give me a gift. And that person whose gifts is not even on their top 3 love languages thinking, I don't understand you. Like, are you all about money and materialism? Like you don't care about my time? Like, aren't I important to you? Right? Do you see where the miscommunication comes in? So I'm not inviting people to be angry and therefore then react to those around you. I am asking you to tap into your internal anger, know where it is and know how to express it. If you are someone who is spiritual or you're judging yourself because you're angry sometimes and you're like, well, I can't be spiritual because I'm angry. I'm going to call bullshit on that, guys. Be angry, but use it as leverage and use it as information. So this is just the first part of anger and spirituality, all right? And it doesn't mean that you don't heal some of the, again, limiting beliefs, some of the childhood wounds, some of the core wounds. Of course, when you make peace with all of these, I think, Gary, as you've called it, the unloving parts of yourself. He didn't like the word healing. Well, I like the word healing, but whatever, the unlovable parts of yourself. When you make peace with that, when you love the unlovable parts of yourself, then it doesn't happen as often and it doesn't last as long and the sensation isn't as pronounced. So, but we're human and new things happen all the time. It's called evolution and it's called expansion. And to keep growing at every new level, at every new expansion level, we're going to have new contrast. And again, we have all of these emotions. In fact, on the feelings and needs list, there's 100 different feeling words on that list. 100. How many of you could come up with 10? Maybe a lot of you could. The average person probably couldn't. How many of you could come up with 20 or 30? And these are variations on the frequency on the different words. So like in the category of anger, there might be mad, aggravated, frustrated, irritated, miffed. I'm actually not reading it. I'm actually just recalling this from my memory. So I want you to get more comfortable with identifying your feelings. So again, if you don't have the feelings and needs list, go to jjflazanes.com/feelings list, because the most important part is the second half where you have the needs. Doug and I are finishing up Dr. Terry Real's book, and we're on the 5 winning strategies in relationships. We did an episode in the Inner Circle called the 5 losing strategies in relationships, but the 5 winning strategies are a lot longer and much more complicated in a way because they're new. And as we're going through it, and I'm listening to couples therapy and how the application of some of these work, I keep recalling, again, the reason why I do the work I do is because while I know that this is a better structure and that a lot of the advice is very effective, sometimes if we do your own work, if you take responsibility for your own stuff instead of blaming it on somebody else, and you actually problem solve what's going on for you, because anytime we have a negative emotion, all it means is a need is not being met, or we have a perception that a need is not being met. Every single time, without exception, if you're in a negative space, there's a need you have that's not being met. And I will tell you, most of us don't know what our needs are or how to identify them. Every time I do a live event, I have to include this piece. Every time Doug and I have done a corporate event, I have to include this piece when it comes to customer service. Because if you don't understand the needs and feelings of your customers, you won't make the best choices on how to serve them. I mean, if you're a client of mine, you know I ask you your sign like from the get-go. I know your love language, most of you. I know your signs. I have them on file. I try to understand from the vantage point of if there was something to go awry, how would I need to communicate in a way that would best work, that would be most effective, that would be delivered. So it's a very important tool, not only for yourself and your relationships, but for business and for life. So again, jjflazanes.com/feelings list. Okay, I'm going to go back to the topic at hand here, which is anger. So rage and anger live in your liver and in your lower back, and it is definitely toxic, and people with years of toxic emotion that you're holding on to can definitely create disease. It can create digestive issues. Your digestion can be affected. It can create skin issues, and it's mostly lower jiao, which is your second chakra, sex organ area. So we're talking about uterus and ovaries and prostate and lower back, anything pelvis related, everything in there. If you're someone who's afraid of anger, here's an opportunity to work it out. Here's an opportunity to embrace claiming your personal power and learning how to use it for good, learning how to use it to express, learning how to use it to feel it, to express it. Just again, it could be to yourself out loud in a room. But until we acknowledge it, It is a block. It is a block for releasing and getting out of depression. So let's say you're someone who's spiritual and you don't ever really exercise your anger. You don't express it, you judge it, you think it's a low vibration, you think it's not a healthy thing to be, and it's not a conscious place to be. And I'm here to tell you, it's a stepping stone. You're not going to go from depression to hopeful. Well, depression to hopeful is not that big of a leap, but really it's more like depression to insecurity or possibly unworthiness. But when you go up the emotional scale, that's why a lot of you and a lot of people in general beat themselves up when they learn about law of attraction, because they think, well, how come I can't be happy? I've been depressed. I've had this momentum going for years. I've had this story going on that tells me that I'm powerless and I have no choice and that I'm trapped and all these other things you tell yourself. And I tell that to myself every day and I reinforce that every day. And then I use law of attraction and I put something on a vision board. How come I'm not happy? Well, I don't know, because the frequency hasn't changed. So using the emotional scale can help you relax a little and give yourself a break. And all you're doing is reaching for a better thought. A better thought than depression, again, could be jealousy. Now, we don't want to stay there. We don't want to stay in rage. We don't want to stay in anger, but we don't want to be in denial of it either. And I think that's what's been going on for me, is trying to balance having all my fire, generally being okay with the situation at hand, except for when, of course, I go out into the world and feel inconvenience because I'm in alignment, and those people who are out of alignment are asking me to do things that take me out of alignment so that they can possibly get into alignment. See how that makes no sense? I'm in alignment, doing what feels good for me, what I understand to be right and true. And you're out of alignment, asking me to change my behavior, hoping it puts you in alignment. No, that is not how it works. You're still the creator of your own reality, and your alignment is still your inside job. Now, what the outside can reflect back to us is how well we can hold that. How sustainable is it? Where else am I not feeling secure? Maybe my momentum is so great on the negative side that I can't hold the positive very long. I can do it in short spurts. Again, think of it like exercise. I can do a sprint for just a little bit of time, but then I have to rest. But the more that I do it and the better I get at it, the more often I can do it well. And that's where practice comes in. It also really helps, again, on the conscious level to recognize where it's beneficial. So when I was having this conversation with my mother the other day about the world, if you will, and my dad taking a test, and my frustration was of the lack of critical thinking and the lack of wanting to be curious and wonder about new information. Full knowing my mother wasn't open and asking. But my frustration led me to come out of that conversation and recognize and appreciate, deeply, deeply appreciate, that the reason I am who I am, the reason why I am so curious and committed to my own health, my own happiness, my own frequency at all times, is because of my mom not. And it's not because I don't want her to stay there. God, I appreciate that this momentum, this contrast that I have in my life has caused me to ask for more. And a lot of you, I know it's the same. Some of you have reached out to me because you don't want to be like your parents. You don't want to be that person, and you see the trajectory, you see it happening. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want to be like that. Let's stop this train now and start a positive momentum train, and please teach me how to do that. So I was deeply appreciative that this is why I am who I am, and I'm happy with who I am. I like who I am. I acknowledge and appreciate who I am. And while I'm still human and things do bother me from time to time, it's a lot less than it used to be, and I usually know why. And when I don't know why, I refer back to my feelings and needs list. I go through the 3-step process. I uncover the need that's not being met, and I get it met. Problem solved, feeling better. For those of you, identifying your needs is hard because of probably your paradigm growing up with your family. All you can do is listen to your inner guidance and to do what feels right for you. If it doesn't resonate, it's either not right for you or it's not right yet. And you have to honor that, but you have to be able to identify it. So hopefully some of you will feel a bit of relief. Relief is also a great indicator that you're creating some positive momentum. You're releasing resistance and you're remembering who you really are. And I just want to say, when it comes to spirituality, and again, I'm not any expert in spirituality, so to speak. I really don't even consider myself an expert in law of attraction. I just understand it. And I feel like I know how to interpret it. I know how to deliver it to you in tangible ways that is usable, that you can see results from. I have tools for you. One of my mastermind members, Alejandra, shout out to Alejandra. She's been on the show before. She's a doula and she'll be back on the show. But Alejandra basically yelled at me and said, you need to do a better job of telling people you have tools. And I thought, okay, what do I need? What do you want me to do? Because she's like, I listen to Oprah and I listen to Brene Brown, but they don't have tools. Like, you give people tools to do. And yeah, I do. And so here's another one, guys. I'm giving you all the feelings and needs list and Abraham's emotional guidance scale. So that way, when you're literally finding yourself in, let's go with number 12 is disappointment. I hate that word, by the way. Disappointment means you're still blaming somebody else for how you feel, but whatever, disappointment. One up from disappointment's overwhelm. And one up from that is frustration, irritation, and impatience. So what that feels like for me is 12 is still in victim mentality. Overwhelm, a little bit less victim. But when you're in frustration, irritation, and impatient, that feels less victim and more neutral. Like, that feels like a place and a frequency where you can actually take responsibility for your own frustration, irritation, and impatience. So using the emotional scale can help you not try to make a big leap from depression to joy and wonder why you still feel crappy. So I just wanted to give you this tool. And again, also invite you to take the mini course. I think it's really good. Everyone that comes to a live event pretty much agrees that this is a game changer session. And it's one that I'm going to create more of and take it a little bit deeper, because I always end up leaving an hour and a half to 2 hours for it. And it needs like 4, because there's 2 parts to this. There's number one, as a responsible, emotionally responsible human, I think there's a need for everyone to know how they feel, to be able to identify those feelings, identify the needs, and then learn how to ask to get those met. If we all individually did that on a regular basis, oh my God, what a world we live in. And what relationships we would have. It would just be amazing. So I first feel like you need to do it for yourself. You need to be able to identify it within yourself. But the next step, when you're a listener and someone has a complaint, your spouse, your child, a student, a coworker, your boss, recognizing the 2 parts in what happens when someone approaches you with a complaint or a request. Your unhealed wounds, your feelings of lack of worthiness, fear, being judged, all of that, whatever your wounds are, will want to defend yourself in a rightness way. That's one thing that happens. And that is a gift, because it allows you to work on it and allows you to address it and it allows you to overcome it and transcend it and use it for leverage for expansion. But most people don't use it that way. You just get defensive and then you get hurt. And then you blame it on the other person. So the first part of someone coming to you with a request or a complaint, when you can solve your own feelings and needs, you can put that aside and be more of an observer. And now when you're in observer mode, you can listen for what the need of the person's request is. What are the feelings and the needs of the person? Doug and I did this course in one of our customer service and journey mapping with one of our corporate clients. And this company had lawyers on speed dial. Anytime any customer would call with a complaint and they were angry, especially women, the male owner would immediately knee-jerk call an attorney and be ready to fight. Now, what kind of energy did you think that brought towards him? So he spent a lot of money on lawyers. And after this course, that we did with them, it reduced their expenses dramatically because now they were all trained to listen for what they needed. What do their clients need? They obviously feel frustrated and angry and sad and fearful or whatever, although not always obvious. I shouldn't say that, because sometimes, again, anger is just covering up fear. Anger is covering up sadness, especially in men, but in strong women also, because they don't like the feeling of powerlessness. They don't like the feeling of lack of control. So remember, if you can tap into, you hear somebody yelling, but you can actually sense their very, very large fear, very real fear and sadness of what's underneath that anger, then the anger it goes right by you. So when you can be that observer, or when you can at least put your stuff aside, you can start to be an effective communicator and problem solver for other people, who then you earn their trust and their vulnerability because they know you're listening, because you're actually really just listening for their feelings and needs, and you're not taking the blame. You're able to hear them differently so that you're not interpreting it as, I'm bad, I'm stupid, I screwed up, I'm not good enough. Because when you can do that, I think that's when it's the best relationship. And that's when we can just live our lives in a state of empowerment, in a state of, I have an empowerment strategist title, and I'll be creating an empowerment strategist course and certification. Spoiler alert for next year. But it's partly to get people to realize, like, when you know you can get your needs met, when you recognize that you're the creator of your own reality and your feelings are yours and that they came out of a belief system or interpretation, you do have that grounded sense of Zen-like, anything is fine, and surrender and trust. But that doesn't mean you never get angry. So to circle back here, a couple things. One, anger is part of the human experience. It doesn't mean if you haven't felt angry in a while, there's anything wrong with you. It just means that don't be afraid of it. Your astrological profile may also shy you away from it because you're afraid of it. And of course, any kind of core wounds or environment you grew up in, maybe some kind of an addiction, or maybe you have abuse in your past. Of course, you don't want to experience that again. And so there's some serious work to be done on making peace with the emotion of anger without feeling traumatized or without feeling fear for your life. And that, of course, work would need to be done with somebody else. I don't think that work is something someone can do by themselves. And if you're someone who judges others for not, for their anger, I would reel that back in and use that mirror and ask yourself, what is it about them that makes me uncomfortable? Why am I uncomfortable in judging? Oh, because I'm afraid. Because it makes me afraid. What's my need? To feel safe. Okay, how can I feel safe with someone else's anger? And that's a question, that's a serious question, because sometimes the answer may be, I need to leave, or I need better boundaries, or I need communication around, healthy ways to work through anger. But at the end of all of this, the bottom line of all of this is not to just express your feelings whenever you feel them, it's to understand them. Feel comfortable releasing them and expressing them, but solving the problem they're asking you to look at. Because without doing the deeper dive into what is the anger saying to you, what is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you're really sad about? What need do you have that's not being met? If you don't take care of that, you will just repeat again and again this situation because you actually haven't solved it. Negative emotion brings us a problem to be solved. You have the tools to solve it. Now you have to create the awareness of the pieces and parts, part of it that's yours, that you need to do, and how you can ask in a safe way for what it is that you need, not from one specific person, but having multiple ways to get your needs met. It's not, nobody's job is to make you feel better. It is and it's not even possible. I mean, I hope you guys really get that. You can be pleasing to other people to a certain degree, and then one day they could just change how they respond to you. And you'd be thinking, oh my God, I didn't do that right. When I act like this, they're okay. But then I acted the same and then they reacted differently. Guys, it's out of your control. I want to empower you to dive deep into who you are and learn how to make peace with all of your emotions, all of your thoughts, all of your parts and pieces, the parts you think are ugly, the parts you don't like, until you make peace with those, until you answer the question, what is it you need, self? And how do I get that met? We will not be transcending disease or negative relationships or being unhappy or attracting things that are uncomfortable all the time. Again, contrast is necessary. It's not like it's not an all or nothing. It's not I'm happy and I'm sad. It's gonna bob and weave. It's going to evolve, and it all has a purpose. It all has an opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with any of it because you are where you are, and that's okay. Abraham says that often, so repeat after me. I am where I am, and that's okay. One more time. I am where I am, and that's okay. And how do I get better than where I am? Well, first I have to understand why I'm where I am, or just reach for a better feeling thought in the moment to feel a little bit better until you're ready to deal with it. So I hope today's show stimulated a few ahas for you in an awareness about you and others. This isn't just about you. You can apply these understandings to other people to have more compassion for them. But again, if they're not asking, they're not listening. So save your energy. You just let your path unfold and respect that they're on a different path. And when they're ready, they'll ask. And that's when you offer what you want to offer to contribute to those around you. And if you're like me, when you have a lot to offer and no one to give it to, find people to give it to. Start a podcast, start a group, write, blog, make videos. I don't care. But it's not the world's job to be your audience or your family or your spouse or your parents, right? Nobody in my family listens to me. Never have, and they probably never will. And that's fine. It's not their job to. So your loneliness, your frustration is probably because you need an outlet of like-minded people. You need someone to contribute to. So work on that, but don't hold others responsible that don't comply with what makes you light up. You follow your path. You take care of you. You be the master of you. You take your PhD in you and use these tools to do it. So jjflizanes.com/feelings list to get the feelings and needs list along with Abraham's emotional guidance scale. And then I invite you, it's a very inexpensive course. It's $97 to take the mini course. You're going to get all of the handouts and you're going to get 3 more audios. And it's a really great, it's an aha event and presentation. I promise that it will help you not only take back your power of your own emotions and needs, it will help you in your relationships. So you can go, if you're interested in just jumping straight to the course, because you'll get everything else also, you can go to jjflizanes.com/mini course if you already have the handouts that I talked about. So, all right, everybody, I am wishing you well. I'm sending you love, and I'm sending you safe anger processing. And I'm sending you curiosity to dig a little deeper and take the time and space needed to allow yourself to have and honor the emotions that are inside of you. Because if you don't, that's what creates depression, anxiety, and toxicity inside your body. You deserve it. You need it. You will expand because of it. And no one else can give you permission but you. But today's show is me hoping to give you a little extra permission and invite you to care deeply about who you are and care deeply about how you feel and honor that by taking time and space for you to process anything that's not serving you. See you next week.